Before I begin, candidate Anthony Lewis has asked me to say a few words on his behalf, which all the other candidates have agreed to and are more than happy for me to do. As you may be aware, Ant has aphasia, a speech and language disorder caused by a serious stroke 10 years ago. Ant is taking a full part in this senatorial campaign, but his difficulties with language means that the traditional hustings format of questions without notice is not practical for him. So he will not be answering questions tonight. Aphasia is a condition that affects communication but not ability. He will be responding to the questions online, on his Facebook page, and he will also be holding a number of surgeries, which are better formats for his particular disability, and has asked me to thank you for your understanding. So, without any further ado, we'll hear from the first candidate, who is Mr. GERARD BAUDAINS.
Monsieur le Connétable, Mr. Trinity, good evening. Welcome, thank you for coming. Now, we're told the government wants to build on what it's done and wants to do more. I, for one, would rather they didn't. I've had enough of the so-called achievements. Like our invisible hospital, 28 million spent, half of that on consultants. I can only presume we gave them one of our credit cards. There's ministers' refusal to diversify the economy, leaving us dangerously reliant on the finance industry, or the contracts. A contract like the one we had with the filmmaker, with more holes in a sieve. Who writes these contracts? The civil service. Are they accountable? No. What are ministers doing about that? Nothing. Then there's ministers' refusal to have an immigration policy because their friends in big business presumably want cheap immigrant labour, or the assertion that immigration is needed because of an ageing population. That's nonsense. We used to have work permits and a 20-year qualification. That's been whittled down over time. We need to reintroduce something similar. Guernsey kept their system. They don't have GST or our dysfunctional system of government either. Now, we have to change our system, and we also have to change the way that we vote, because choosing candidates by the most attractive manifesto no longer works, because when they get in the States, they find the ministerial system prevents them from delivering on their manifesto pledges. The result is voter apathy, because people feel no matter how they vote, nothing ever seems to change. To break the cycle of misery, we must elect candidates who will commit to changing the system, because until that's done, all other election pledges are futile. So if elected, I will dedicate myself to changing the system. I'm Jersey born. I have the experience necessary for the post of senator. 40 years running my own business, 13 years as a states member, where I served on the Public Services, Housing and Telecoms committees. I later served on the Shadow Scrutiny Panel, the Planning Applications Panel, the Privilege and Procedures Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, the Law Revision Board, and other working parties. I was also Vice Chair of the Environment Scrutiny Panel. But even that's not enough. You need the qualifications of a private detective to cut through the spin and misinformation to get to the truth. I have those qualities. If elected, I promise to drive the two issues that affect everything else: reform of ministerial government and immigration control. And I will seek a ministerial post in order to deliver that. I will be grateful for your vote on May the 16th, and thank you for listening.
Our second candidate this evening is Deputy Sam MEZEC.
Monsieur le Connétable, friends, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this evening. My name is Sam MEZEC, and I've been the Deputy for St Helier No. 2 District for the last 4 years now. I hope that I've shown in my time in the States that I'm a hard-working member who never shies away from asking tough questions and proposing alternatives when I don't think the government has got it right. I fought from the backbenchers to improve the lot of low earners and the squeezed middle, and I've opposed every government attempt to roll back public services, introduce stealth taxes, and I've successfully fought to implement my previous manifesto commitments on things like the living wage, equal marriage, and a crackdown on exploitative zero-hours contracts. I'm standing for senator now because I want to play a positive and constructive role in the next government of Jersey to force to the top of the political agenda for the next States Assembly the aim of improving the standard of living for all islanders. I don't want to shout from the sidelines. I want to be at the forefront of delivering change. And this election on the 16th of May is your opportunity to vote for change in the way that we do politics here in Jersey. Opinion poll after opinion poll shows us that the public are not happy with how the States works. We have the lowest voter turnouts in Europe, and most of the people I speak to feel that the last few years of Jersey politics have been characterised by dysfunctional government, a lot of wasteful spending, and an over-reliance on UK consultants because nobody in the States is ever held accountable for anything. But these are issues which feel like they come up election after election, and nothing ever really seems to change unless things actually get worse. Many of you will have felt over the last few years that life has got more difficult, with the cost of housing going up, wages stagnating, and strains on our public services. And we've all heard the shocking stories about poverty increasing in Jersey too. These are trends which simply can't carry on forever. The next government must work to reverse these trends and set the island in the right direction. I'm standing for election alongside 17 other candidates on a joint manifesto, 33 pages long, with 10 key pledges which we know are deliverable and which will have a tangible impact on improving life for many islanders. We're not interested in personality politics. We only want to debate the issues and put forward what we hope you'll consider to be sensible solutions to the challenges that Jersey faces. You might not like everything in our manifesto, but I hope that voters will see that there is a better way of doing politics, a way which is much more capable of meeting the aspirations of the people of Jersey and delivering a better government system for all of us, no matter what our political views are. If you want change, I hope you'll consider voting for me on the 16th of May, and I promise you that I will work tirelessly to make this a fairer island for all of us. Thank you very much.
Next candidate is Senator Ian Gorst.
Monsieur le Connétable, ladies and gentlemen, I stood for elected office to make a difference and to provide hope for the future. This election is very much about change. As Chief Minister, I've guided our island through some of the most difficult economic and social challenges that we have faced. But over the next 4 years, we face challenges and will have to make decisions which will set our course as a community for many, many years to come. The uncertainty of Brexit, other international uncertainty, the uncertainty of the EU. And I know that as a community we've also suffered from the global economic recession. And I understand, as Chief Minister and as a father, the effect that that recession has had on family budgets. Jersey is a great place, and we've made significant progress right across the community, but I am not satisfied. There is more that I want to see achieved. And I'm talking about 3 main aims in this election. Firstly, effective economic leadership. That means protecting and building on the many good things that we find already in island life. So supporting the businesses that are already here and encouraging improved productivity and digital diversification. Because our economic strength has not happened by accident. I'll continue to represent Jersey's economy and way of life on the international stage, defending our reputation in the EU and elsewhere, and promoting investment and trade. I want, and I have always wanted, to ensure that all islanders share in this success. So secondly, I'm talking about improving islanders' lives by building on what we've achieved so far. But I want to do more, and that's why I'm proposing an Affordable Housing Commission, a coming together of the community to drive down costs and to increase supply. A refocusing of the competition regulator, driving down the cost of living. A building on the long-term care scheme, providing government support at the parish level. And post the inquiry, I'm proposing a new contract with children and young people. And thirdly, I want to see government and the civil service transformed. We've recruited a new CEO. We started the reform of government, but there is more that we must do, driving out waste and focusing all that we do on serving islanders. When we work together, we can achieve change and a better way. I stand for hope for the future so that you don't risk yours. I would appreciate one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you very much indeed.
next candidate is GINO RISOLI.
Good evening, everyone. My name is GINO RISOLI. I'm a local businessman, resident of St Helier for the last 30 years. I'm married with 2 boys studying at universities of Bristol and Reading. I have studied politics, religion, cultures and sciences for 25 years in relation to human behaviour. It's my hobby and it's my interest. Today I want to explain that we're living through great changes. What causes change in human development are new ideas. New ideas are propelling society many times, thousands of times faster by the internet than even 20 years ago. All around the world, governments are struggling to come to terms with the speed of change. Jersey is no exception. Unless we are at the cutting edge of change, we become subject to other people's ideas. Truth is a requirement for expansion. If government writes a policy that is perceived as unfair by society, social media will tear it to shreds the next day. Turmoil is what we get. In this very understanding, I have given you the solution. Government must introduce policies that are perceived to be fair. A fair society delivers cohesion of people and ideas. We as a community become more intelligent, more creative on every level, simply by passing fair legislation. Old-style politics, those that pursue them, some of those, old and young, are on this platform. We thank them, but we must move on. Some may say this sounds like a good idea, but how can I deliver? I have the experience and knowledge to spot good policy. Accountability must be our first goal, financial accountability. The detailed spending will not only stop the colossal waste of public money, but it will inform us of what the government is doing and not what they say they're doing. This strategy will rid us of all the people that are stopping growth in society. However, more than this, it will create the space for those that have integrity to enter the political debate, having removed fear that now exists. That is what transparent and accountable government can achieve. Working together would now be a reality rather than a nice idea. It means going to work with a spring in your step. We can have confidence in any of the challenges, create new ideas for business and provide employment. Fairness becomes a norm rather than the exception. No need to write endless legislation countering unfair policy. Our children will grow up without confusion. Health and welfare will benefit enormously. Sickness and disease will slowly become outdated. Less pressure on social services. Yes, I have a vision. A vote for me will start the process of delivery of these policies. Thank you.
And the next candidate is Constable Steve Pallett.
Good evening, fellow Conatard and parishioners. My name is Steve Pallett, and I'm the Constable of St Brellards. In this election, I'm standing for Senator because I believe I have the energy, leadership and experience to play an active role in the island's next government. I've focused on a number of issues during my campaign, but tonight I'm going to focus on affordable housing and making Jersey more active. 37 years ago, in my early 20s, with my wife Anne and a young baby, we managed to make our first home in Trinity. But one of the biggest challenges currently facing our younger generation is finding affordable housing, both to rent and purchase. My daughter and son-in-law have had their own struggles, but like many have had to wait into their 30s to make that first step due to the lack of truly affordable first-time buyer properties. It is important that we provide such first-time buyer homes as a priority, because if we don't offer our younger generation quality affordable housing, then we are not going to encourage them to return to Jersey and make Jersey their home. We need to make Jersey as attractive as possible to more of our young people. If we are going to address our skills gap and reduce our reliance on the current levels of unsustainable inward migration. If elected, I want to work with the parishes to identify sites around the island for the construction of a further 500 affordable homes. Capped at £300,000 for a 3-bedroom home, these properties would remain in the first-time buyer category in perpetuity. Trinity, You should be applauded for being one of the parishes leading the way on this issue with the nearby development of first-time buyer homes. But each parish is going to have to play its part. Any new development, though, must not only be in keeping with our island, it must provide good, open amenity space. That is essential if we are to improve islanders' physical and mental well-being. As Assistant Minister, I established Jersey Sport in 2017 as the independent voice for sport in the island. Working alongside Jersey Sport, I want to lead on a new strategy called Active Jersey. Active Jersey will increase accessibility facilities for all, from the 6-year-old in the playground to the 76-year-old in one of our excellent fitness centres. Active Jersey will enhance islanders' sense of well-being and identity. Active Jersey will also work to reduce and prevent illness and obesity. It is essential, not only does our health service have a sustainable future, but that ultimately the burden on the taxpayer, all of you, is reduced. Ladies and gentlemen, if we work together, we can have an active future and improved access to affordable housing. I believe I have the energy, leadership and experience to get the ball rolling, and please consider me for one of your votes on the 16th of May. Thank you.
And our next candidate is Stevie Ocean.
Bonsoir, Monsieur Connétable. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stevie Ocean. Now, you think I'm standing up because I'm going to give you a song, but I'm not. If I sit down, you can hear me, but I can't hear myself. So for the Q&A part of the evening, I will be remaining seated, and there will be no disrespect intended. So I was here 2 years ago, sitting over there. And what did I turn around and say that I would achieve? And I did. I actually got onto Google in America and tore them to pieces. I actually had the letters UK removed from our 5 islands and educated the Americans that we are not part of the United Kingdom. I'm in the process of doing the same thing with LinkedIn in America and also YouTube and Twitter. And I'm going to educate these people to the extent that we are not part of the UK, and that's as far as that goes. Also, I made history, and I'm very, very proud of this. Back in 2016, I had a problem. Well, it wasn't a problem as such, it was a disaster. And what actually happened was that the ballot paper was confusing and misleading. My name, everybody knows me on, not just in Jersey, but throughout the world, was just an insignificant part in brackets, and it caused a lot of problems. Anyway, I decided that when I was going to stand, I made up my mind that I would do something about this. And I got in touch with the government department. They represented me in front of the law officer, and my equity card, which was current, I actually decided to put in for credence. When the law officer saw what was on my equity card, he went white as a sheet, because I'm not Peter Mac, and he really turned around and said that after the event. And I'm not knocking Peter Mac at all, far from it. But our statuses are completely different. On my equity card, I have personal liability insurance of £10 million, which Peter Mac doesn't. So basically, my my situation was granted, and you will find out on the ballot paper, it's completely changed. It's completely simplified across the board. It's easy to vote this time, and you can pre-vote at St Paul's Centre from 8:30 in the morning till 17:15 in the evening. Don't forget to take some ID with you. So let's go to the manifesto very, very briefly. Aha! I'm not going to go into it in detail. I've still got a minute. The first 4 parameters on my manifesto need state's approval. The last 2 I'm working on. Basically, if I am elected, I want to be a major player in the state's chamber. Thank you very much.
Our next candidate is Deputy Tracey Valois.
Good evening, Monsieur Connétable, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Tracey Valois. I have served as a States member for 9.5 years as a Deputy of St Saviour and as a Deputy of St John. I have carried out numerous roles during this time that have either influenced or directly impacted on policies and legislation. I have served as an Assistant Minister in both Education and Treasury, as the Chairman of the Public Accounts Committee and President of the Scrutiny Chairman's Committee, and been party to approximately 50 reviews. I have proven that I am able and willing to work with all members on all areas that have challenged and continue to challenge our island in a responsible and effective manner. At a time of uncertainty for both residents and business, we need a public sector and the political representatives who govern them to listen, lead and learn with honesty, integrity and respect. During the next term, we will see a great deal of change, not just within the political arena, but from the impacts of Brexit, a new island plan, and from within the public sector. It will be vital for those who are elected to work as a team. Take politics back to basics, engage and communicate effectively to enable, support and provide for islanders for the long term. Controls around population need to be considered on an individual basis rather than through business. We require the requisite skills to assist business, but at the same time we need to recognise the impact it may have on public services and the ability to provide sufficient supply for the demand, particularly in the provision of adequate housing. Our personal tax system needs to address the role of allowances against direct funding, such as early years provision, and join up with the system of income support to assess the impact and functioning of both, particularly for in-work benefits. Provide an ability for creative and innovative thinking within education and reskilling to support future economic needs for both the individual and business. There is a need to ingrain a fairness into our processes so people feel supported and not threatened. These are huge tasks to grapple with, but my tenacity, love of Jersey, our future and the well-being of our environment, community and economy is why I would ask you to consider me for one of your votes on the 16th of May to start the ball rolling and establish changes to achieve long-term goals. Thank you.
And the next candidate is Senator KRISTINA Moore.
Good evening. I'm Deputy KRISTINA Moore, but I hope I might become a senator. My campaign is about balancing competing priorities, working with others effectively to find a better way and a sustainable future for the island. We can do this by focusing on three issues: the economy, the environment, and our community. When making decisions, we need to take all three of these issues into account to deliver a positive result for each and every person. We all love our island's beauty. People want to see decisions that maintain our green fields and spaces, that improve the quality of our water, air and soil quality. But we need to balance the needs of our community to know that people struggle to find appropriate housing for their family. And the high cost of housing leads to financial hardship, as it takes up a large percentage of a family's total income, leaving little else. Compensating for this by taking on extra work to boost income can have an impact on a person's health and their family life, which is one of the findings that the Children's Commissioner has recently described. You understand this joined-up way of thinking in Trinity by supporting the provision of affordable housing for both young families and your elders. Walking around Clogallishon this afternoon, I met many families who are so pleased to have their homes alongside the beautiful potato fields and the views of the Jersey countryside. Uplifting as it is, the views alone don't pay our bills. Our community has always been hardworking and industrious. We've competed in international trade since Roman times. Today we have an economy that performs well and is competitive, and I want to see it strengthen for the future. The more successful business is, the more revenue we'll raise to provide healthcare, education, and help to those who need it. Boosting productivity is essential, and to achieve this, we must manage population growth also. In this digital age, there'll be a challenge to the way we work, and there are also solutions to be found that can help in many industries. As a government, we're adopting some of these. For example, our police officers now carry mobile data devices with them so that they can do their admin efficiently and spend more time out in the community. We must also ensure that and encourage every islander to skill up and respond to the rapid change in the world and the needs of local businesses, which is why I support the Digital Skills Academy. Of course, our traditional industries, tourism, fishing and agriculture are important, but we can also encourage greater diversity by developing a platform for arts and creative industries to grow. British brands are admired throughout the world and generate billions of pounds. Jersey has inspired artists for centuries. Let's play to our natural strengths and seek out these opportunities. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll consider More for Jersey for one of your votes.
The next candidate is Anthony Lewis.
You have never seen a candidate like me before. I am different. I have a different campaign and a different voice, but different is what Jersey needs. My stroke has left me disabled, but it has given me courage, determination and new insight. I will represent those who, like me, don't have a voice. Not just the disabled, but everyone who feels that today's politicians don't speak for them. My focus includes the environment, equality, and community. We need to improve the community of Jersey. We need to improve the environment. It will cost money, but it is an investment for my children and your children. There is no clear voice for the environment in the current states. That has to change. Equality. I bring a new perspective, one formed by both success and hardship. I believe mental health provision must be higher up the political agenda. More understanding and reduced stigma. Where we see inequality and stigma in Jersey, it should be fought. We are improving and have more cosmopolitan living. To create a more equal island. The dangers of having an island of haves and have-nots. I believe that the most marginalized and downtrodden members of our society have something to contribute. From the inmate at Lemoy to the homeless man in the parade, we all have insights and abilities to help make Jersey a better place to live. Everyone has skills and talents. Everyone. We need a system that allows those talents to flourish. The first step is to break down our own stigmas. That is a role of education and defining common goals. Our children and their schooling hold the key. It is then identifying those abilities and channeling them where they are most needed. We need more social enterprises to create businesses and programs that build on our social capital, like my campaign headquarters, the Beresford Street Kitchen. Communities working together makes us all stronger, and it starts at school. We also need greater recognition of support. The voluntary sector. With more effort from the states, we can better coordinate the work that charities do. I will be the first person with aphasia to stand for the states. I appreciate that makes me different. You may ask, how will I be able to represent you? With modern technology, I can. But for more information, please visit my website, www.andlewis.com. I hope that I will be able to represent all islanders, including those who don't always fit in with the norm. You have 8 votes for senator. Please use one of those on someone who will truly represent change. Thank you.
And our next candidate is Gordon George Troy.
Good evening, Trinity. I'm Gordon Troy, educated at De La Salle College. I'm from a business and politically motivated family that are passionate about the island that we love. I'd appreciate your vote so I may have the honour and privilege of serving the people of Jersey. If I'm elected, I'm to bring propositions to the House. 1, to introduce a livable pension for senior citizens. 2, to make housing available and truly affordable. 3, introduce a population control and work permits. 4, peg GST at 5% and remove it from food items. And 5, to crush government financial waste. Mr. GORST's government has failed our pensioners, bringing hardship to many. I want pensions increased to what I call the livable pension, so that pensioners can enjoy retired life. Pensions created our economy and modern society. We owe them a debt of gratitude. I intend appointing a commission to look at how we can improve every aspect of pensioners' lives, from pensions to healthcare, from diet and exercise to well-being and community life. And moving on to what young families need, and they need affordable homes. And to build these, the government actually has to do something. And it has to do, 1, government must allocate land for the appropriate large and small houses and apartment sites required. No sites, no housing. 2, government must provide a low initial deposit purchase scheme for first-time buyers. 3, government must provide a mortgage payment scheme to fit the buyer's incomes and or tax breaks. 4, government must offer shared equity schemes. 5, government must remove the user pays planning charges from planning applications. If user pays stays, it must be on planning applications that are approved only. The planning department gets money every time it says no to your new homes. And there's a million planning opportunities, a million no opportunities in every planning application. For the next 30 years, we have a difficult population demographic, as many of our working population retire. We must manage our population with a balanced approach to immigration control. Work permits, short and long term, are essential so that we can service our economy and provide staff for our industries. I want accountability for state spending because the states of Jersey have caught a spending virus, and the cure and medicine is make projects, 1, necessary, 2, value for money, and 3, on time and on budget. The next fiasco, 65 million for airport improvements. Unbelievable, unnecessary. With bed nights lost, we need to create more beds before we build more airports. States members must stop spending. Jersey's not the Bank of England. It's home here for us. I'm a doer and we need government of doers. Please vote Troy for Senator.
Our next speaker or candidate is Senator Sarah Ferguson.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm sorry. It's suggested that we must have unlimited immigration to have a sufficiently large working population to support the ageing population. The proposed immigration policy is that immigration should not exceed the average of that since 2001, 700 people a year. That means that by 2035, we will require 185 Le Marais blocks and 6 new primary schools, a real Ponzi scheme. Where will we house them? We need more sites in the villages to give youngsters a chance to live in their home parish. The New Island Plan gives us the chance to identify sites. We must also develop an amended migration policy with work permits urgently. We need to improve the quality of our water. We need a joint effort by farmers, utilities, and the community. Farmers have begun to reduce their use of chemicals, and some are conducting experiments to move from chemical to regenerative farming. The indications from the results look very promising. Reduced costs, reduced need for staff, better quality, earlier crops, and better drainage of fields. Howard Davis Farm was set up as an educational and research station for agriculture. It's time to bring it back into that use, to research into improving agricultural methods. We have a vineyard, a hemp farm, trial tea plantations. What else can we grow? And let us not talk about the problem of the aging population. That's rubbish. Who is looking after the children in the holidays? The grandparents. Who is doing much of the volunteering in the island? The aging population. Who is doing much of the caring in the island? The aging population. That is, when they're not climbing Kilimanjaro, hiking through the Pampas, or trekking across Iceland. It is time we stopped calling them a problem and paid more attention to the way they are treated. We talk about improving skills for the 21st century. One determined resident has actually done more recently, whilst education has been talking. He has kitted out all our primary schools with up-to-the-minute computers, and children are racing ahead. Catch them early. Don't wait until they leave school. We need change desperately, but we need prudence in spending. Please vote for Sarah Ferguson for change with common sense.
And the next candidate is Deputy John Lafondre.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Lafondre. I've had the privilege of representing St Lawrence as Deputy for the past 12 and a half years. But tonight I'm seeking your support to receive an island mandate. Professionally, I'm a chartered accountant, which is very useful when dealing with expensive states projects, complex legislation, and large sums of expenditure. We need sustainable finances, and I'm not ignoring the many other issues we face as well: education, environment, youth, mental health, population, to name a few. But the money has to work first. My job, if I'm elected, is partially to keep the costs down so that tax rises are kept to the minimum possible. Over the last 5 years, I've been doing more and more on an international basis, working with both the French-speaking parliamentary side, Assemblée parlementaire de la Francophonie, and I also represent Jersey on the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly. In the context of Brexit, and as we face other external political pressures, it is critical that we promote the island, improving understanding of Jersey's constitutional position and the value of our finance industry to the City of London and the UK. I've been with Levo Housing Trust for over 20 years, giving me a first-hand experience of the difficulties faced in providing social housing on this island. And I want us to be focusing more on first-time buyers rather than luxury developments. It's got to be about housing that people can live in. I support the current review of the housing market, and I want to see houses and flats that people can treat as a home, not just something they use in passing. As President of Scrutiny and Chairman of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel, it's been a hard job holding ministers to account over the past 3.5 years. We've issued the first legal summons to get information, and very recently we've changed the law so that we can put witnesses on oath. We've looked at things like the finance centre, the hospital, Brexit, and most recently a high-level look at population policy. Government communication has been poor. We shouldn't have to read the small print to understand the reality of what the Council of Ministers is doing. Consultation needs to be genuine and sincere. As regards farming, I was very heavily involved in the Bull-Seaman debate, and politically, I was the main driving force that got the Glenham Davis building, the present dairy, to its site at Howard Davis Farm. I wasn't going to be the Jerseyman that watched the Jersey herd wither and die in the island, and I'm proud of what we achieved. I value the parish community and the many benefits of the parish system. I have proven political and financial experience. Decisions I make are based on hard evidence. I look at the long term. I'm prepared to listen, and I will work hard to get to a solution. My pledge to you is that if you elect me, I will continue to challenge and to act in the best interest of the island, and I hope you'll consider me for one of your 8 votes for Senator, and thank you.
The next candidate is Senator LYNDON FARNHAM.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In November 2014, I was appointed Minister for Economic Development, Tourism, Sport and Culture. And since then, I have worked on behalf of islanders to deliver strong, sustainable growth across all sectors of the economy. Maintaining a strong economy is important, not only because it provides new jobs and career opportunities, but also creates the wealth required to help those in our community who find themselves in need. It also allows society to develop for the benefit of everyone. Whilst there has, beg your pardon, it's technology, you see, I should have attended the digital hustings today. This evening, I too would like to talk briefly about affordable housing. And whilst there has been progress since 2014 with the delivery of over 250 new homes by Andium, with more on the way, and the acquisition of sites capable of delivering in excess of a further 900 homes, together with some much-needed parish schemes, and Trinity, of course, as we have heard from Constable Steve Pallett, have been pioneers with this. In addition, the private sector is delivering about 300 new homes a year, but it's still not quite enough. It simply must be a key priority, a key target, in fact, for the next States Assembly to increase the supply of homes, at least in line with demand, if we are to continue to make progress. The stumbling block for so many young people aspiring to home ownership is, of course, the cost and raising a deposit. So in addition to addressing the supply, there must be greater efforts to help islanders onto the housing ladder by introducing more help to buy schemes, and these should include deposit loans, shared equity, and equity release opportunities. We must also exploit new construction methods with new materials aimed at driving down costs and improving environmental standards and, of course, reducing home running costs. There are currently at least 1,000 households in the rental sectors looking to purchase affordable homes. And if we can help to facilitate this and release housing stock in the rental sectors, then we will create a more consistent supply which should stabilise pricing and improve standards across all categories of housing. Ladies and gentlemen, you will hear many negative comments from candidates this evening. And yes, we do have many challenges ahead, but we have strong foundations, and we need to strengthen those foundations further if we are to deliver a secure future. To do that, we will need to elect capable people, experienced people, people with a good track record in life who are committed to attaining that goal and working together for the benefit of all islanders. And I ask you please to bear that in mind when you vote on the 16th of May. Thank you very
much. Our next candidate is Moz Scott.
Monsieur le Connétable, ladies and gentlemen, I'm an Oxford graduate, a former tax specialist and a qualified Jersey lawyer. I'm a former partner, owner and director of a major local law firm and trust company which had over 800 employees. More recently, as a leadership trainer, I have helped to improve organisations. I know how to use teamwork to get the best results, even through uncertain times. With most of the Council of Ministers having abandoned ship, change in this island is unavoidable. But change can be an opportunity to move forward. Even Brexit may present an opportunity for Jersey to prosper in the right hands. I'm not an established politician who has taken the island's economic strength for granted by allowing the waste of huge sums of public money and failing to make better use of this island's limited resources, nor have I approved targeting pensioners, working mothers, and local businesses to compensate for this waste. My skills and experience are easily transferable. I've studied the island's constitutional independence and scrutinised its laws. In my voluntary role as chairman of the St Brellard's Bay Association, I've learnt more about the shortcomings of the island's planning laws than most state members. If elected, I will work towards stopping the waste of public money, cutting red tape, and making our tax and social security system fairer and more efficient. Because we need funds to help those in need, not another quango that passes the buck. I'll work on a revised island plan and other measures that support better use of this island's limited resources while improving protection of its scenic beauty, reservoirs and its heritage. I'll work towards an improved partnership between government, the business community and our undervalued voluntary sector to avoid unnecessary spending while supporting those in need, and to invest in education and training in ways that help to break the poverty cycle and to equip younger islanders for a secure and promising future in the island in a changing world with Jersey's special identity still intact. Most importantly, if elected, I will deliver a proposition to reform the State's Assembly, to make it better value, and ensure ministers are equipped to act as a team with scrutineers to deliver the result you actually need. I'm standing as Senator because I wish to offer my skills, knowledge and experience for the benefit of all islanders. This is all I can deliver in the time allowed to speak. So please look at my online manifesto to find out how, if elected, I will deliver much, much more to you. Please consider me for one of your votes as Senator on the 16th of May.
Our next candidate is Deputy Simon BRÉE.
Good evening, Monsieur le Connétable, ladies and gentlemen. I am Simon BRÉE. I'm proud to be a Jerseyman and honoured to be a Deputy for St Clement. I am Chairman of the Economic Affairs Scrutiny Panel, the Future Hospital Review Panel and the Machinery of Government Review Panel, and Vice Chairman of the Corporate Services Scrutiny Panel. I have been working hard on your behalf to hold this government to account. There are major issues facing our island which will have a direct impact on the daily lives of every one of us. Unless we tackle these now, our quality of life and our island will change forever. Brexit is looming, with its unknown impact on our economy. The finance industry is vital to our economy and continued prosperity, but we must diversify our economy and support farming, tourism, the digital sector, small business and startups to reduce over-reliance on the finance industry. Population growth, if left unchecked and uncontrolled, will have serious consequences on our quality of life. Work permits, which are seasonal and time-limited, are the only solution. Families looking to buy their first home are finding it impossible. Government must support parishes in delivering small-scale, affordable home developments to give islanders hope for a better future. Much sooner these than large-scale developments of concrete and steel. We must reduce the financial burden on middle to low-income families by reducing the cost and size of the public sector. This does not mean reducing services, and simply raising taxes and charges is not the answer. Removal of GST on food and children's clothing would be a step in the right direction. And government must stop wasting your money. £26 million on a new hospital without a spade being put in the ground. £800,000 on an aircraft registry and only one aircraft to show for it. Countless millions spent on UK consultants, with more spend just announced by the new Chief Executive. Politics in Jersey has become polarised. It is time to regain the middle ground. It is time to have a government that has a social responsibility and is not just some uncaring, soulless corporate entity run by grey-suited accountants whose only concern is balancing the books. It is time to have a government that is committed to protecting and upholding the traditions and customs that make Jersey unique and wonderful. It is time to have a government that listens to all the people, not just big business. It is time for new political leadership. It is time for your voice to be heard. Your vote is your voice, but change will only happen if you vote. This election offers you a real opportunity for change. To the role of Senator, I bring my work and life experience, my political experience, my strong work ethic, and my courage to stand up for what I believe in. Working together, we can make a real positive difference to the lives of every member of our society. I would be honoured to receive your vote. Thank you.
Our next candidate is Frank LUCE.
Good evening, Trinity. My name is Frank LUCE. Thank you for attending this hustings tonight, and thank you for ensuring that your name be on the electoral roll, enabling you to vote. Your vote and how you vote has never been so important. We are facing a landmark election. You are going to shape the future of the next government for all islanders. You, the minority, are going to carry the apathetic majority into better government by your choice of candidates before you tonight. Never before has the gap between the government and the electorate been greater. Islanders are so appalled by the antics of the present sitting states members, they have turned their back on politics and have lost total faith and feel angry that their opinions are completely ignored by the elected members once they get into government. Frankly, reading letters to the editor in the Jersey Evening Post should be made compulsory reading for all states members. The appalling successful low voting turnout since the war was testimony to the contempt Irelanders have for standing government. The situation can only be reversed by better government made up of members who first and foremost listen to the people and shape their policies to make government inclusive to the electorate. Then and only then will the general public feel included, in touch, and this will result in a greater desire to vote. In the meantime, and for this most important election, your vote will speak for all Irelanders. Potential voters see the system of government in Jersey as bad. They want nothing to do with it. That was an opinion held by me. However, the present Assembly have horrified me to such an extent that I am now before you, asking for your vote so that I may represent the thoughts, feelings and opinions of Irelanders in the Chamber itself. I want to have a strong and significant input in two long outstanding issues: the appalling hospital saga and the independent inquiry into the lifeboat power and personality struggle the present government does not wish to happen. To face in the new Assembly the looming priorities of Brexit and population control, and ensure that agriculture and tourism are better supported, to form a holy trinity of business sectors along with the finance industry. I want to work for a listening States Chamber that puts Irelanders first, and for that I need your confidence and your support and vote. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you, and I hope to meet you and be of service to you for the next momentous 4 years. For your ballot paper, the name is LUCE, Frank LUCE. Thank you for listening to me. Good night.
And the final candidate to address us is Phil Maguire.
Good evening. So, what do we think of Charlie Parker's new plan to make us more like Whitehall? Isn't it dreadfully exciting? It's promising to save money and reduce jobs. Except, of course, it isn't. It's going to be a repeat of Ag and Fish, where departments are going to close, and the same people are going to go to the same places and sit at the same desks and earn the same money with the same pensions, only no one's going to know what to do with them for a while. It's funny, because recently I asked a civil servant, how many people from Ag and Fish are still working in the States and not doing much apart from twiddling their thumbs? And he said, not many. Not many. Whoopee. If we're going to look to making a change, I suggest we add a new department to his system. Let's call it the Department for Retraining and Redeployment. Why don't go to all this fuss? Well, according to Charlie Parker, 3,300 job profiles are balmy and inappropriate. 3,300? That's almost half our civil servants. If we don't keep an eye on them, we really can't afford to have them just vanish into the ether and get paid and paid and paid for nothing. Also, what about the cost of retraining? 3,300 people. If you just spend 1,000 each, that's 3 million. You know, we need this properly timetabled and budgeted. Otherwise, it's just going to cost money and money and money. Now, who has the least faith in this? Well, Charlie Parker himself, because he said all this amazing change is going to save us over £1 million. Over £1 million. That's 1/6% of our budget. Not much of a saving. I mean, great if we can get it, but worth all the effort? And how are we going to realize this saving? Because if it's over £1 million, that means we're going to spend the first 2.5 years paying back for the pension plot that we had for buying off the previous incumbent. And then there's all the consultants. How long are we going to say? How long is that going to pay back? If we're going to do the job, let's do the job properly.
Right, we'll now come to question time, and the candidates have agreed that we'll take questions in blocks of 2. So I'll ask for 2 questions in a minute, and Before I do, I will say that this is the Trinity Hustings, and I really want to have questions from Trinity residents first. If Trinity residents run out of questions, I'll open the floor to others, but it's Trinity residents. So when you get the microphone, if you would give your name, and the other thing I'd like to say is we aim to finish by 9:30, so there will probably be the opportunity for 2 rounds of questions. And the candidates have agreed that we will start the answering of the questions at candidate number 6, who is Stevie Ocean, for the first 2 questions, and then the second 2 questions will be candidate number 12, John Lafondre. So without further ado, I'll ask for an indication. Who wants to ask a question? Yes. Sir Nigel.
Good evening. My name is Nigel Broomfield. I'm sure the candidates will have noticed there's been a certain amount of controversy about the site for the new hospital. Notwithstanding the inspector's rejection of the first proposal, the Health Minister, who is with us this evening, continues to insist that there is only one site which meets the island's requirements. But when Atkins reported on the list of 41 sites at the outset, they thought that the Warwick Farm site, quote, could be considered the preferred option, particularly regarding the longer-term view of the hospital and its flexibility in responding to issues in the 40 to 50 years hence. These views weren't put to the states when they voted on 2016. Against that background, my question to the states is, do the candidates think that building the new general hospital on the site of the existing hospital is sensible, without allowing the new states, which is to be elected in 2 weeks' time, to consider the question and look at the other sites in the parish of St Helier before a final decision is taken in September and October? My second question is to you, Mr. Chairman. At the end of the answers, would it be possible just to have a show of hands, those in favour of building on the new site, on the old site, and those who would like to have a second thought about it? The decision, of course, is yours. The question is to the candidates.
Thank you, Sir Nigel. I think it was Mr. Hino. If I could just mention, if we could have questions rather than speeches, I think. Sorry, I should have said that to start with.
Thank you, Mr. Laconitab. Procurator Williams, I can assure you that you won't have to ring your bell because it's not going to be that long. 2-part question. First of all, should the bailiff remain in the States? And secondly, how do the candidates see the future of the constables remaining in the States?
Right, thank you, Mr. Hino. Right, so the questions as I understood them was, what are our views on building the new hospital on the existing site? And the second one was, are we happy, or do we views on retaining the bailiff as the President of the Assembly and the future of the constables? So I'll ask Stevie Ocean to go first.
Nigel, right. I'm going to tell you about my site and my plan for the hospital. It's completely different from anybody else's, and I came up with this the other day, and it's not going to the Echoes or anywhere like that. Basically, the General Hospital should be moved to the St Saviour's Hospital site. And with it, Overdale moves down to where the General Hospital is now. That's going to become a state-of-the-art health centre with an A&E as well. And La Barre also moves down to the General Hospital. That will leave the other two now. Overdale becomes a mental health and well-being centre, and La Barre becomes a drug and alcoholism centre. Now, that's the plan. Basically, if we continue to go along the lines of where we are, we're going to have a lot of problems. I mean, there are people living in Kensington Place, number one, and besides that, the dust and everything else is going to be unacceptable, and we'll get into the hospital and into the patients, the noise as well, and the consultants won't work on a building site. I've got that from them personally. So in answer to your question, no, I don't want the hospital where it is. Thank you. Monsieur, question number 2. Yes, now the bailiff remaining in the States. This is something that I've, been involved with when I was, pardon, don't ring the bell yet, with the Jersey Rights Association when I was chairman. This is tradition more than anything else. If we get rid of the bailiff out of the States, then we're going to have a speaker, and that's going to have to be an advocate, because a lawyer or a solicitor can't even open his mouth. An advocate has to do that. On the point of the connotabs remaining in the States, I think it's a good idea, because let's face it, there's got to be a link between the parishes and the States. Thank you.
And we're here now from Tracey Bulwer.
Thank you for your questions. In terms of the hospital site, from what I'm hearing from people and from what I've heard over the last 4 years, 5 years, even previous to that, not everyone likes any particular site, and it has become a huge controversy, and the public have lost faith in the actual project management of the hospital site. And this is what I fear in terms of it being our biggest and largest capital project that the states are pursuing. In terms of the site, I mean, I'm no expert on building a hospital. I've always looked at it from a patient perspective. And I supported the Constable of St John just before the end of term with regards to a review. And I believe in order to bring the public and their views into the decision-making process, that the new states should be able to have an agreement as to whether that is the correct site or not. In terms of the bailiff in the States, I've stated since 2010, I actually wrote to the commissioner at the time who was doing the review that I did not believe the bailiff should be the president of the States, and I still hold that view. And in terms of the future of the constables, well, we've had a referendum and the people spoke and stated that they wanted to keep the constables in the States, and I respect that point of view. But of course, your question was about the future of the constables in the States. And I think if we're going to grapple with electoral reform and equity of voting, and from my experience of this process as a senatorial candidate, and we're looking at equity for voting, then I think we should consider how the constables can be part of a future parliament process, but not maybe necessarily in terms of the voting, or so their voices are still heard and recognised in policy development. Thank you.
The next speaker is Deputy KRISTINA Moore.
Thank you. Sir Nigel, we aren't very good at making decisions about buildings and where they should go in the island. Just look at the years and years of painful debate about the police station and where that should be. That is now a very excellent functioning public building that is a brilliant example, and one that we should aspire to for all of our public buildings, in my view. But the problem is the outcome. There is a site at Summerland that's now vacated by the police, but we're still only demolishing it. And actually, there could be 65 homes there ready. And so the delay in the debate has actually resulted in people who desperately need homes not having them, because they could be living there right now rather than waiting for them to be built. We have been through a lengthy process, and it is never easy, but somebody has to make a decision at some point. And with modern building practices, recently a very large building has gone in just at the bottom of Kensington Place, and the St Helier did not grind to a halt during that time. I appreciate that it's a sensitive building, but we have put in a lot of groundwork and spent a lot of time looking at it, and I feel confident that we can make progress, and we must think about the people who will benefit from using a hospital of a high standard in the future. Mr GINO, on the bailiff, I have voted in the past to remove the bailiff from the States. I think the time has now come for a change, but we will now go for a referendum, and it will be for the public to make their views known. And I've also always supported the constables remaining in the States. I supported the Option B campaign and the Yes campaign at the previous referendum, and I feel that the constables are a sound and wise voice and should remain there. Thank you.
Next to speak is Gordon Troy.
Thank you. Yes, regarding the position of bailiff, I think it's not an entirely democratic position. So I believe there'd be value in changing the position. But I think we've really got to debate that. And the same for constables, really. They're very important on the ground. What they do in the parishes is really some of the most important government work that there is. We're keeping the community together and making the system locally work and feeding back to central government what's actually going on in their areas. So I'd like to keep the constables. Just moving on to the hospital, the decision has been taken by government to put the hospital in Gloucester Street, the new one. And I think the fact that the government has made that choice, it should be respected. And but I don't agree, on the other hand, with keeping the old front Grade 1 listed building, because I think it impedes planning opportunities, and also a Grade 1 listed building, it's going to have sash windows, and I don't see how you would contain an airborne virus with those in place. So thank you.
And the next question will be answered by Senator Ferguson.
Thank you. Right. Yes, I never quite understood why Atkins, we didn't continue with them and changed to another firm, because Atkins actually had a lot more knowledge about matters building hospitals. The new planning application isn't for the whole hospital. It appears to be just for demolition and access to the site, and we will need all sorts of additional planning applications for reserved matters. And I think originally I voted for the site, and then as things started falling out and we discovered that it was going to be considerably higher than the illustrations said, and the fact there's no accommodation for on-call staff in the new plans, you know, the catering is up at St. Peter's, which is a nonsense. I changed my mind, and I agree that we need a level playing field review of the sites. You know, we've got 4 or 5 sites. We need to look at them again. And I supported the Constable of St. John. And it's also going to be essential to bring any revised plans to the States so that we can have a full public debate. You know, we haven't taken into account properly the health of patients and the neighbours and the fact that it's in the flood zone. Bailiff, yes, I think we keep him in the States. The alternatives are too awful. And the future of the constables, we had a referendum. They used to bring controversial matters to a parish assembly. I think it's time they started bringing that practice back. And, you know, when there's the revised plans being brought to the States of the hospital, they should have parish assemblies to discuss it. Thank you.
On John Lafondre.
Sir Nigel, I support a new hospital. I think the whole project has been handled badly from a political and a public perspective. And in short, I want the cheapest, quickest site with least disturbance to patients and staff. I was originally site neutral. The Council Minister's figures showed that the waterfront was £20 to £25 million cheaper. With finance costs, that doubles. That's £40 to £50 million cheaper. And what has always concerned me was we've never had a like-for-like comparison since the specifications changed. I was actually stunned, and I said it to his face, when Senator GORST said on the St Lawrence Hustings and on the radio on Sunday that it was going to come back to the States for further endorsement. That's fine, but in which case, why did the Council Ministers not support the Constable John's proposition, which would have allowed us to have a like-for-like cost comparison on the main alternatives, and that work could be being done now, so we wouldn't have delay in September, October or November. Otherwise, what are you endorsing? You're working in a void. You've got to have that detail. I'm worried about people in their end of their lives having to deal with demolition and construction for the 6 to 8 years of that construction period. So to answer the question, no, it is not sensible that it is not brought back to the states for a final position, but we need to have proper data to make that valid comparison. In relation, Mr. GINO, in relation to the bailiff, my personal view is that we are incredibly well served by someone who is trained to be impartial. To be honest, I'm fed up with power games that seem to be going on to try and get rid of the bailiff and sort of wheedle words about still respecting that position. Any change will mean further costs. I don't think we're going to get that impartiality if we get somebody else in that place. And the bailiff does not have a vote. He is not a lawmaker. And he's also there as guardian of the Constitution. And that's clearly an important role, particularly in the context of what's been happening in the last week or so. Constables, I support, and we had the referendum. I hope that answers the questions. Thank you.
I call on Lyndon Farnham.
Thank you. Going back to paper. I had always envisaged the new hospital being located out of town, but after carefully looking at all the plans, I think locating the hospital somewhere in the ring road is probably sensible, because that is where most of us, or most people in the island live. Having said that, if we could find some virgin sites or something like that, that would be better. But for me, I think that the most important thing, if we look over the next 30 to 40 years, we're going to spend somewhere between 10 and 15 billion pounds on running the health service. The build cost is about 3%, 2 to 3% of that. So I think really we want to be focusing on making sure we spend that 10 to 15 billion pound wisely to get the best doctors, the best nurses, pay them well, invest in the best technology, and get the best equipment. That's where, and we need to start thinking about that soon. The new states, I think, will insist on redebating it, and I think they probably should, and I look forward to that debate. In relation to the bailiff, I think the states are incredibly lucky to have the island's chief judge and a lawyer presiding over us. I allude to John's comments, the guardian of the Constitution, and I think we're very fortunate, and we should keep the bailiff. There are a lot of games going on, and the politicians that want to remove the bailiff and remove the constables, I think want to do it for other reasons. I'm looking up there to the history, 1500, and my eyesight's not good enough. I think the constables have served us pretty well, and I hope they could continue to serve you in the States for a long time to come. Thank you.
More Scott.
Hi, the hospital. Well, there seems to be an awful lot of measures that have gone through the states just before the next new States Assembly. It's almost like, you know, they don't want the new people to even look at these things. I am uncomfortable with the new hospital. It wasn't based on a clear vision of future health and care management. It was spectacularly mismanaged, the project, and involves a level of finance that could bankrupt Jersey if mishandled. I don't even know if alternative means of financing were even looked at. So I understand why everybody's uncomfortable with this. However, there's also many stories that have been going around, and as some with a legal background evidence is important to me. So my intention is to pursue the facts, if elected, to really get to the bottom of that. The bailiff. The bailiff, well, yeah, I think he should stay in the States Assembly, because every alternative suggested so far has flaws. And making laws and interpreting laws are different things, and the bailiff is excluded from voting. For me, I think the States Assembly needs to focus on reforms that achieve more professionalism, transparency and leadership in the conduct of government with more immediate benefit for all islanders, which brings us to the constables. I have in my manifesto set out proposals where we can have better representation, more direct parish representation without this conflict that happens when you have constables or deputies become ministers or assistant ministers. I'm in support of the constables remaining in the state, but having a reduced number of representatives, which would mean fewer deputies. I'm very aware of the results of the referendum, which supported constables for now. Thank you.
Simon Brée.
Thank you very much. The future hospital and its site. In 2016, when the states debated the preferred site, I voted against it. I was only one of 3 members at the time who voted against it, and I'm the only person who voted against it in this room tonight. In 2017, I was then made chairman of the Future Hospital Review Panel. We recommended that before the states debated the preferred scheme, which is the site and the funding, that it was delayed until planning permission was granted. No, the Council of Ministers said, we know better. Look what happened. The debate went ahead. I still voted against it because it's the wrong site. And then suddenly we get planning permission turned down. We've spent £26 million on this so far. For what? I believe that we need to look very seriously again at the site. The last thing that the Future Hospital Review Panel did was make a recommendation to the Council of Ministers that the new Assembly coming in, because it's going to be so different, have the opportunity to re-debate the plans for the new hospital. The response we got was, no, it's not required. I think that is atrocious. The new Assembly has the right to debate it. Perhaps we'll hear differently from the Chief Minister tonight, but that was the stance that officially he gave us. With regards to the bailiff, yes, of course the bailiff should stay in the States. He is an independent voice, truly independent. And I dread to think what would happen if he was removed. But you must remember the bailiff acts as the President of the States Assembly. He is a servant to the States Assembly, governed by what are called standing orders. So we can change those standing orders. But I support the bailiff remaining very, very much. With regards to the constables, I think the public told us through the referendum they wish the constables to remain. Thank you.
I call on Frank Luce.
Sir Nigel, thank you very much indeed for your question. I'm a great admirer of your letters to the editor because you speak common sense. You make things clear. The one and only place there shouldn't be a hospital is in Gloucester Street. It's a no-brainer. You need a flat, level, virgin site where you can build a new hospital while the patients enjoy the comfort of the hospital they're in at the moment. I've spoken to various doctors, including my own doctor, and my own doctor says he knows no doctor in the island that is for the hospital in Gloucester Street. He also followed it up by saying that he has spoken to many, many people who work at the hospital, nurses, physicians, the like, and none of them are for the hospital in Gloucester Street. Nobody with anything between their ears would put the hospital in Gloucester Street. It's as simple as that. Forget the cost, which will be twice as much as it would be anywhere else. Graham Beasall is a resident of Grooville, wrote a lovely letter to the editor. He said that we've spent £26 million on a new hospital. Why didn't the states buy St John's Manor? We could have a lovely, lovely hospital in the middle of the island and we'd have a few million spare in our pockets. And that is common sense. As for a review for the new Assembly, it's a must, because the old Assembly will not be there. You'll have new voices and people who've got something between their ears. Bailiff, the bailiff is a wonderful position. It's got history. It makes sense. No, the bailiff stays exactly where he is, and we'll all be thankful. When it comes to constables, constables are the father of the parish. Constables are vital to the islands and the way of life. Constables should stay as well. Thank you very much indeed.
And I call on Phil Maguire.
According to the Future Hospital Panel, it's going to cost us $466 million to build this hospital. According to the chairman of the review panel, it's going to cost closer to $800 million if we borrow the money. That's a huge sum of money, and my main concern is what happens if we get it wrong. So let's argue it now before we've actually spent too much more money. If there's a new option on the table that might be a sensible one, let's discuss it. Let's not just dismiss it because it's too late. My own preference is that we should have a green site where we can build it properly, because if it's going to need to expand again, it's not going to be able to expand in Gloucester Street. We've cramped it in on all sides. That's like giving it a straitjacket, which makes no sense to me personally. But if it is there, fine, as long as it's built properly. As far as the bailiff is concerned, I don't mind the bailiff too much, but the idea of replacing him means it's going to cost extra. The going rate at the moment is £1 million a year for every new civil servant we add. Who needs to spend that kind of money? What is wrong with the bailiff doing his job? Who could do it better? You know, really, honestly. As for the constables, I can't believe we're still discussing this. You know, we put them in order that they can represent the parishes. How can they do that if they don't have a voice at island level? It's a madness. How can you say, oh, you just look after your parish? No, the parish is part of an island. Yeah.
And next to speak is Gerard Baudin.
Thank you, Mr. Constable, and I promise not to shout. Is building the hospital on the present site sensible? Well, not in my view. However, it's already cost a substantial amount of money. And my concern is that there's no real consensus on where it should be. People talk about St Saviour's Hospital, the Warwick Farm, People's Park, Gloucester Street, waterfront. Are we going to spend the next 5 years trying to discover which site is the one we actually want? And think of the extra cost of doing that. We've already spent, what, the 28 million? We haven't done anything yet. Extra delay, extra cost. It's got to the stage where Gloucester Street is not the ideal site, but we really can't afford to put it anywhere else now. The decision's been made. Blame the present States Assembly. Now, should the bailiff remain in the States? Absolutely. I do get slightly annoyed about the idea that he is conflicted. I've been in the States for 13 years. He's not conflicted. He merely sits as the President of the States. He's the Chairman. In my mind, if anyone's conflicted, it's the Attorney General, who's the sole prosecutor, head of the Honorary Police, and advises the States Assembly. But we worry about the bailiff. And who would take his place? The constables. Well, originally the States was the GERARDs, the rectors and the constables. The constables are the only state left. They represent their parish very well. They bring stability. Yes, they should certainly stay in the States. Thank you.
Next to speak is Sam MEZEC.
Jumping the gun a bit there. On the new hospital, I have always believed that the hospital must go in town. I don't think the out-of-town options meet the technical specifications or transport requirements. But obviously a clean site is preferable, and the waterfront fit all of the criteria best. And that option was ditched purely for political reasons, because the site has been earmarked for luxury apartments that none of us will be able to afford and which will bring no benefit whatsoever to the island. So, of course, the new states should have the final say on it. It will have a new democratic mandate. It should have some sort of say on it. And if the boat has sailed and it is too late to do anything other than have it on the current site, then the States needs to up its game, and we need to have a proper consultation with the people who are working in the hospital, who know best the struggles that they have, and I dread to think what it will be like for patients during this time. On the bailiff, let's be clear. The bailiff is far too important a person in Jersey's community to act as playground supervisor for misbehaving politicians. He's the top legal mind in the island. He should be in court where his expertise are best placed. And when he is in the States, deciding which States member gets to talk in which order, we have to pay expensive English commissioners to come and run our court when somebody else could easily do it for a fraction of the cost. It's actually better value for money. It is not more expensive than the current system. On the constables, one of the reasons that we have dysfunctional governments in Jersey is because the system of electing our governments is so dysfunctional. My policy is that we should move to a system where there is one type of states member elected in equal-sized constituencies, where everyone on the island, no matter where you live, has an equal vote. And by the way, if we have that system, we could actually reduce the number of politicians perfectly easily too. I think that would revitalise our democracy, give us better calibre governments, and provide a good opportunity to improve the relationship between the parishes and the states, give the parishes more enhanced powers and responsibilities, and that, I think, would lead to better democracy on all levels for Jersey.
Senator Ian Gorst.
Thank you, Conatub. I'm just wondering whether I should ask the Health Minister to remove my rosette from his lapel before I start, bearing in mind the response of the hall this evening. The hospital is one of those really difficult decisions that the next Assembly has got to make and stick with, and not keep looking over its shoulder and wondering if only there were another site that were better. We know what the planning inspector said about the site. We know that another application has been submitted. So I know, Sir Nigel, you don't agree with me, but I think we should get the planning inspector's view of the new site. And although I've been criticised this evening for saying I then expect the new health minister to seek endorsement of the Assembly of that planning application, I absolutely do. When we asked the public were absolutely split down the middle. 50% said yes, they thought it was a good site, 50% said no, and this is the difficulty that the next states is going to have to make a decision on, because the current hospital is not fit for purpose, and now is the time that we need to build the new hospital. Should the bailiff be the Speaker of the States? The problem we've got is not about individuals, and I'm mindful of Lady Burt sat on the front row, is not about individuals. It is about whether our institutions meet international standards. And if we look at the Bangalore and the Latimer principles, then we are not doing that. The States has made its decision. That decision is now coming to the public in a referendum for their view. I think that's the right democratic approach to the role of the Speaker. When it comes to constables, yes, I voted yes that they should stay. The referendum said they should stay. But the government needs to work much more closely with the parishes and with the constables about some of the services that we provide to islanders.
RISOLI.
On the question of the hospital, before I came to Jersey, I was actually an industrial electrician, so I've got some construction understanding. Now, when I first heard that the site was going to be built on the same, well, I have to say I was horrified, because I think you'll find the cost overruns will be enormous, and the environmental pollution that happen while that happens is going to be pretty bad. But there is another. I mean, it was a greenfield site. I would have simply found a greenfield site and made sure there was enough room for every facility there: parking, nursing staff, everything. That's what I would have been looking at. But interestingly, what I thought was a bit odd. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Ian, but on the way to the first tower from the inner road, I've seen this. It looks like an electricity substation installed well before the debate got going, which sounds like the power supply for the new hospital. I'm not sure. I'm not terribly sure. Perhaps we can discuss it later. So I think that actually what will happen is they'll revisit People's Park again. I think that is what they're determined to do. They want it on People's Park and the present site. Now, as far as the constables are concerned, I don't have a problem with the bailiff, but the constables, turkeys don't vote for Christmas, so I think we must say that we pay them as constable the same rate as a states member. They can sit and give evidence in the States Chamber, but not to vote in the States Chamber. That's my solution.
And finally on this round, Constable Steve Pallett.
Well, I don't think there's a person in the room that's going to disagree that we need a new hospital. I think it's how we've got to the stage we've got to now. People's Park, we're not going to revisit that. It wasted a lot of time and money the first time round. I certainly don't want to go back there again. I have to say, and I know Senator Green's here tonight, I think the actual application for the hospital, the actual planning application, I don't think it was handled particularly well. I think the planning inspector had little option to recommend its refusal. But, and there is a but, the new scheme, the scheme that I've seen, is a vast improvement on the previous scheme. I just want to go back to the states debate that we've had very recently, because I was sort of tipping and turning one way or the other about where I was going to go in terms of a review of the sites, and quite a few people contacted me on that. But there was one speech that made my mind up, and that was the Deputy of St Wan's, very respected member of scrutiny, who made it quite clear we'd had debates on the site and we'd had debates on the funding, and we'd agreed them. And I think that's where we need to stay. I think we've made those decisions and we need to stick with them. In terms of people that say you can't build a hospital on the site, there's hospitals being built all over the world in inner cities. Great Ormond Street's a perfect example of building a hospital in a city. I don't think it caused any particular harm to the patients, the young children that were there. So it can be done. Don't say it can't be done, because it can be done. Some of you won't like that, but I think we can move on, and we need to move on with the hospital on the current site. In terms of the bailiff, actually one of the few things I agree with Deputy MEZEC on is that there are other things that the bailiff should be doing. I think he should be overseeing the Royal Court and dealing in the Royal Court, and clearly I want the constables to stay in the States. I ran the Yes campaign with another colleague last time round. It's important they stay in. I know the links that I have with ministers I would never have if I wasn't in the States, and it allows me to get things done, and it's allowed me to do a lot more. So they have to stay. Thank you.
I'll thank the candidates for their responses to those questions. And just before I call for the next two questions, I will indulge Sir Nigel, but I will, just so that the potentially new members of the Assembly can go away from Trinity knowing what the view of Trinity is it to stick or to twist, basically? So I'll keep it simple. Are you happy to crack on as it's currently proposed with the revised scheme, or do you want to review? So if you want to stay with the existing scheme, hands up. And if you would rather we had a further review, thanks very much. Okay. So I'll now ask for further questions, please. Mr. Davis here.
Would you consider getting rid of the Council of Ministers, returning to a form of committee government, as Guernsey has done, thus allowing the rest of the states who weren't on that particular committee to earn their keep and be in scrutiny?
Thank you. And another question? Gentleman over the back. Steve Hewlin.
My name's Steve Hewlin, and I run a small business in the harbour. It's the first time I've been at the Hustings. My compulsion to come tonight is led by the ever-expanding hole in the vault at the top of Cyril Muckle House. There are several issues here, especially with the Hughes Hospital Capital Project being carried out. This is a now question. Issue 1, no one man can look after 600 million plus a year. Issue 2, when 600,000 was put aside for the Sea Cadets, over 400,000 simply blew out the door. So I ask those who were in the States at the time, has anything been done about the process of obtaining money from our tax vault? And I plead to the new members of the House to please prioritise placing massive pressure on scrutinising this process.
Sorry, Mr. Hewlin, could you just condense that into a question, please?
Has anything been done about the process of obtaining money from our tax vault?
From the tax what, sorry? Vault. Right. So if I can interpret that, and we'll start with candidate number 12, Deputy John Lafondre. First one is your view on returning to a committee system, and the second one is controlling the outflow from the tax vault. That's public spending.
Right, that's going to be a fun set of questions to come up here. Committee system. Instinctively and within my DNA, I do lean back to the committee system. I think the Council of Ministers, there's a caveat, I think the Council of Ministers as it's presently viewed is probably at the lowest level of public esteem and regard that I can imagine or remember over the period of time we've had. The difficulty is the practicalities of what that involves. And so where I would be very supportive is some form of hybrid, which is, in other words, may not go back all the way, because I think scrutiny does have a function externally, but I think the benefits of the old committee system of kind of live review of what was going on and people communicating. So we need to tap into the benefits of that. I think it's what I would go for what's called a hybrid system, and I'd very willingly, we worked on it at one point when we were looking at machinery of government side, and I'd look to enhance that as a first instance. There is certainly a case that the present system is not working, I don't think, in the eyes of the public, and I think there's been a number of issues within in the States Assembly, particularly around further and further centralisation of power. Mr. Hewlin, a slightly difficult question there, but what I'm going to say is, in terms of controlling states' expenditure, if that's what the main focus is on, the view I take as one of my jobs is to try and partially keep costs under control so we can limit tax rises. That's my general DNA, that's the soul of my being as an accountant. Part of that is around the public sector reform programs we are seeing. It's got to be properly implemented. We've got to know what's happening. I don't want to hit the frontline people specifically. I think they've taken a lot of brunt of the issues, but there is a lot of administration costs which we are starting to see being removed, and things like consolidated office strategy would save us £10 million a year. And that's something I have direct experience on when I was at Property Holdings. I'd like to see that coming through, if that helps to answer the question.
FARNHAM.
Thank you. I have served in the States long enough to have been involved in the committee system. And I know I don't look old enough before anybody says it. I feel old enough, though, and ministerial government. And there are benefits and disadvantages for both systems, but on balance I have found the ministerial system is more nimble than the committee system. The committee system, we all look back and have fond memories of the good old days, and I know we've been an unpopular government, but I remember sitting around the kitchen table with my parents listening to their views on the P&R committee of the day, and I couldn't repeat them here tonight. So, you know, that's politics. As islanders, we're rightly hard on ourselves. I think that's why we've been so successful over the years. The states approved a new system, the corporation souls, where the ministers are illegally independent from the departments, has gone, and we've got a new consensual style of government in terms of now the Council of Ministers is going to have to operate like one consensual committee. I think the trick is, though, we have not, as a government, involved other states members. We've had assistant ministers, but we need to involve the whole States Assembly in policy making. We used to do that with the committee system, and we must go back to doing that in the new Assembly. It must be more inclusive. The process of obtaining money from the Treasury is a bit of a mystery. I found it quite difficult at times, but financial directions do need to be reviewed. But also, we've got to get the budgeting and the forecasting right. We were asking for tax increases and new charges, and we turn up with a £26 million underspend this year. So looking forward, we've got to get things right. I'm in favour of getting the public sector, the best value from the public sector, before we talk about spending more money or raising taxes. Thank you.
Moll Scott, please.
Would I consider giving rid of the council minister returning committee system? You can blame Clovia for the mess that we're in, actually, because Clovia suggested that we should basically, do away with the committee system, and then it did it for a reason. It did have its problems, and Clovia suggested this ministerial system, and it did so because, well, it was almost trying to create parties within the States Assembly, which is why you've got the conflict, because it was saying on one hand you could have the ministers, on the other hand you could have scrutiny, who would act as opposition. What a daft idea. But it was adopted, because now you have this conflict between scrutiny and the ministers, where scrutiny is regarded as the opposition. So I agree with John that we should have a hybrid system, which is what I've put in my manifesto. So please read it, because it actually might make some sense, which would be quite nice to have a bit more sense in the States Assembly. The hole in Cyril Lamarck on House. What can be done to control? Well, maybe we should just, I mean, it's all very well saying, oh, we're going to have civil service reform, that's going to serve us some money, but as has already been mentioned, it's not going to save that much. So I suggest that we stop spending money on projects best left to private investors, private developers and the business community, on excessive consultant fees, on government, on the services best run by the voluntary sector, on additional government bureaucracy created by stealth taxes and an overcomplicated tax and social security system, on producing more quangos. 300,000 in non-executive fees go to States of Jersey Development Company. Meanwhile, at Jersey Sport, the non-executive directors don't charge anything. They do it voluntarily. You make sense of that. So, yes, I think we could do better.
Deputy Simon Bree.
Move back to the committee system, get rid of the Council of Ministers. Well, we have to be honest and face up to the fact ministerial government is not working under this particular Council of Ministers, or Chief Minister, if you will. And I think the concerns people have is that power has become concentrated into just a few hands. Decision-making is made by just a few people. The recent legislation passed by the states under the machinery of government is going to further concentrate power into two roles. Firstly, you've got the Chief Executive Officer, who's the sole head of the public service. Secondly, you have the Chief Minister, who effectively, in real terms, becomes the sole head of government. It basically is the Westminster model. I'm against it. I think it is completely wrong for this island. And I think that we need to look at ways in which we can move back towards a system where every state's member has the ability to influence policy and then debate it. At the moment, no backbencher really can influence policy. And that is wrong, because you are electing members to represent you in the States Assembly. If they are hamstrung by the system, there is no point in them being there, and that's wrong. With regards to the Sea Cadet situation, a commitment was made by government quite a while ago about a certain amount of money that was going to be given to the Sea Cadets for them to build their new headquarters. That money disappeared, then bits were found again. But if government make a commitment to anybody, government must stand by it. So irrespective of whether, we haven't got the money quite at the moment, sorry, they did have at the time. Money was set aside for the Sea Cadets. Government must honour its commitments. Thank you.
Frank Luce.
In terms of the comments made about ministerial government, what Deputy Bree has just said, I can't better. He's hit the nail on the head. I can't better that. And I would agree with everything that he said. But I'd go even further than that. I'd say that the system of council of ministers is positively disliked. It doesn't work, and it's disliked because it puts the power in a handful of politicians' hands, and the rest of the State Assembly just make the numbers. They have not a say, not a hope in hell. We are ruled by 6 or 7 people, and that is wrong. And for that reason, I would go back to some sort of system like the committee system that we had. In terms of the Sea Cadets, I actually was in the Sea Cadets, and I was Cadet of the Year once. Now, I then went into the Navy and became a very good officer, and then left because I met a beautiful girl. No, I would say to you that if, in fact, a commitment is made by government, and particularly to something like the Sea Cadets, it should be honoured, and there should be a positive interest in looking after organisations like the Sea Cadets, Scouts and the like in the island. So I'm all for government keeping a good eye and looking after them. Thank you very much indeed.
Next to speak is Phil Maguire.
I personally see nothing wrong in trying new things, developing new ideas. But what they should have is they should have a caveat on them saying, here are the targets we have to meet. If they fail to meet those targets, let's dump it and go back or try something new. No targets were set with the idea of ministerial government. It was just a new idea we try out. In practice, I don't think it's worked. I think we've got to go back and say what went wrong. Let's fix that. Let's find a new system if necessary. Go back to the old committee, so try something else. Fine, but let's learn from the mistakes we've made with ministerial government and build something better from that. As far as making commitments to people and setting aside money, yes, I fully agree with everyone else that once that's actually decided, that money should be placed to one side, should be untouched, and it should go to where it should be. Again, though, that should actually contain clear targets so that we don't get a fiasco like the film that never appeared, where, you know, oh yes, we'll just give away £250,000 on the hope of a movie. No, clear targets should have been set and then met, and once met, the money should have been handed out. It's a simple procedure.
So, moving to the other end of the table, GERARD BAUDAINS.
Thank you, Mr. Constable. I spent about 5 years working in committee, in the committee system. Yes, it did have its faults, but compared with the ministerial system, it was almost perfect. We all worked together. People would be, you would be serving on, for argument's sake, the housing committee, but you'd also be a member of 2 or 3 other committees. So you all got to know each other. You all brought your ideas to the table. Everybody's talents were used. Now, well, since 2005, it's all in my manifesto, since 2005, the government is no longer the states of Jersey. It is the ministers. So those people who you elect that do not become a minister, they sit in the back row, they're told to shut up, and as Deputy BRÉE said, they are not able to actually represent you properly. So we need to either go back to a committee system or to something similar. I've suggested perhaps bringing the scrutiny panels into scrutiny, a hybrid of some sort. I mean, the ministerial system was sold to us as saving time, giving better decisions and saving money. Well, if you look at this new hospital build, I think it'll, you might agree that the ministerial system has been a failure. What else can you say? Controlling state expenditure, this in a way ties in with that first question. Ministerial government, as I've just said, was supposed to deliver better decisions. And looking at the hospital, the Sea Cadets, now that money from that was diverted to other projects. Under the ministerial system, ministers are allowed to do that. You weren't allowed to under the committee system. Speaks for itself.
Deputy Sam MEZEC.
I think that the dissatisfaction there is in the Council of Ministers actually more stems from the quality of the decisions they make rather than the system itself. You mentioned Guernsey's system. Well, I wouldn't wish Guernsey's system on my worst enemy. It is very dysfunctional, and I think they provide a good example of why we shouldn't copy their system. Just look at the debate they've had there about their education system, reforming it and building new schools where they have wasted a huge amount of money and time and don't appear to be any further down the road in actually providing for the people there. So I would not want to copy that system. There's been talk about a hybrid system between scrutiny and ministers. Well, that sounds suspiciously like the system they have in the Isle of Man, which they're about to scrap because it doesn't work there either. There's a saying that a camel is a horse designed by a committee. And when I look at projects like the hospital, where we spent 5 years and £26 million with not much to show from it, I'm sorry, but I'm not convinced that a committee system would have sped that up or reduced costs. I think actually it may well have had the opposite effect. Cabinet-style governments work perfectly well in small jurisdictions around the world. And as I said with my previous answer, I think the solution is actually a more robust electoral system to improve the calibre of states members generally. That, I think, would deliver more for the public of Jersey than going back to the old system. The second question, I'm guessing, was about financial prudency. I run on the principle that your day-to-day spending should not exceed what you are earning. And if you're taking up debt or issuing bonds, that is fine as long as it's for infrastructure or economic stimulus projects, and as long as you have a sustainable funding mechanism for them. The last states created a black hole which they tried to fill with cuts to support for the vulnerable, stealth taxes, and haven't addressed waste. That, I think, is unacceptable, and I think the next States Assembly needs to have a better relationship with the state's frontline workers who often know better than anyone else where the waste is because they see it on a day-to-day basis, and not simply ask the senior civil servants who often are more interested in looking out for their own position than the workers who come below them.
Senator Ian Gorst.
Thank you. The questions, probably by accident, are absolutely connected. We moved from the committee system back in 2005 to the ministerial system. What we didn't do then was take away the legal silos. So you continue to have a structure. We've got a fantastic people working in the States. Every day they go in and they want to serve islanders, but they're working within a structure that works against them, that keeps them in the silos, stops them from being creative, and doesn't allow them to drive out waste from the system. We are a small country of 100,000 people in a rapidly changing and challenging world. As Sam said, if we look at our neighbours, every day they are saying they should move from the committee system to something else. The current system is not perfect. The changes that we just made before we went into the election are going to improve it, but we must continually improve to make sure that it's serving islanders. So we need legislative scrutiny. We sit in an assembly and we do the first reading, the second reading, and the third reading all together. There isn't enough time for thinking. There isn't proper scrutiny of legislation. All of that has to change. We probably need a scrutiny management committee. I'm sure Deputy Vallois will say more about this, that scrutinises on topics and engages with the public. And we need the Council of Ministers, rather than individual ministers being able to go off and do their own thing, much more of a collective and a committee system there so that more people know what's going on, more people are involved in that decision making. If we don't do that, we'll continue with waste and inefficiency. It's by driving out the silos that you can drive out inefficiency and duplication across the current 10 or 11 departments. They're absolutely connected together, and we need to do both if we want to serve islanders and we want to stop islanders' frustration with waste and projects which they're not concerned about. Thank you.
On GINO RISOLI.
Well, I actually haven't heard so much nonsense from, Sam and Ian. It's very obvious that if you vote in your representation and they have no authority or power, well, then you're not being represented. I think it's a very simple logic. I mean, if you've ever been to a scrutiny committee, well, I've seen Mr. Gorst flanked by two senior politicians and wouldn't say a word unless he's been whispered into. It's a bloody nonsense. It does not work. Committee system has provided terrible legislation. It really has. Now, as far as accountability, well, you don't have to be in business very long to realise if you don't know where your money's going, you've got nothing. You just as well wrap up and go home. We've had the ability to bring our government to account for 20 years, and it's called the internet. Every piece of spending, every penny they spend could be online for you to scrutinise. Not leave it. It's like giving hundreds of millions of pounds to people and say, oh, spend it properly for me, and not ask for a receipt when a receipt is possible. Unless you get that type of accountability, unless you will not only, you won't stop the waste, but you'll never get rid of the system that we have now, because we have got some very protective policies going on here, and of course ministerial government is profoundly wrong. Sorry, it is wrong.
Constable Steve Pallett.
I think committee system, to come back to that, I think it'd be a retrograde step. I think Ian's already said it. I think with the Council of Ministers that currently is, I think there was an opportunity to review, but I actually think the changes that we're going to be implementing, taking away silos, getting departments to work together, I think will improve the situation. From my own point of view, in terms of working within departments, I think if the minister works well with his assistant ministers and they spread and discuss things and consult properly, I think it works well. I think if ministers do things on their own without discussing it, I think that's when sometimes bad decisions are made. I agree in many ways. I think Council of Ministers needs to better engage with backbenchers. I don't think backbenchers really know what's going on half the time, and so that can be improved. The communication side can be improved. And we talk about accountability. That's what scrutiny are there to do. They're there to hold the feet of ministers to the fire. They've got ways that they should conduct themselves. They've got a code of conduct. They should be holding quarterly regular meetings regularly. That's the way that you hold departments to account. And it needs to be done regularly. In saying that, I've seen times when ministers haven't been as open as they need to be, and they need to engage with the scrutiny process whenever they can. In terms of money and accountability, yes, Charlie Parker is going to be, he's the principal accounting officer, and he will be solely in charge for that amount of money. But it will be delegated down. It has to be delegated down. But it should improve accountability. I would like to think it's going to limit waste and add checks and balances. What I don't want to see financial directions doing is making small sports clubs go through reams of paper to get a small grant. What we should have been doing is make sure that we get our due diligence right on things like the Innovation Fund and things like that, to make sure that money's not wasted at the higher end when we're giving out hundreds of thousands of pounds. So that's where we've got it wrong. Thank you.
Call on Stevie Ocean.
Right. As far as the committee system is concerned, it is a retrograde step. First of all, you haven't got anybody except somebody in charge of a committee, and to the outside world, they think, well, who is that? You need a figurehead, and that's an important factor. Otherwise, who do they think we're dealing with? Now, as far as the way the States Assembly works, I've always believed that everybody communicates within the States Chamber to get things done. Sarah Ferguson spoke to Murray Norton, and Murray Norton turned and said, I can't speak to you. Now, is that a kindergarten or what? Now, I want to see total communication within the States Chamber between everybody. That way, we work for you. And I think that's very, very important. The silos, and it's rubbish as far as I'm concerned, and they can go, and we can get on with the business of getting things done for you out there. Now, as far as accountability is concerned, that film of £200,000 I know all about. The minister that actually gave away your money didn't even sign a contract. And he gave it away to a convicted fraudster. Now, how do I know that? Because I've got privy information from Equity, and I actually emailed the minister, and I turned around and told him what he had done, and he ignored me. And then I went after him, and I said, you better work out a payment system and to pay that money back. And if I get in the States, I'm going to be after him to get that money back. Thank you.
Deputy Tracy Valois.
Thank you for the questions. I don't think 2 minutes is actually long enough to answer two extremely important questions. I've been party to 2 machinery government reviews. I've not worked in the committee system. I've worked 9.5 years in a ministerial government system. And I can fundamentally tell you now, it's not actually the system, it's the people that are working in it. That's the issue. And actually, ministerial government would work if you had political parties, because that's the style that it's worked on. Ministerial government does not work in its current format because of the way that we run our electoral process, or not the way that we run it, but we've got so many independents. and I'm not saying that that's the wrong thing, but ministerial government would work with political parties. So the issue that we've got here is that we hear a lot of people talking about teamwork. I've suggested 6 different types of boards or hybrids that would assist in working in that teamwork way. I've heard about being more inclusive, but yet nothing's come forward or being shunned. And the issue here is that ultimately it's down to the people, and it's ultimately about governance and how governance works, and being able to talk effectively with each other and ensuring that we compromise and listen, most fundamentally listen to the people, ensure that's placed within policies. In terms of the hole at the top of Cyril Amakor House, public finances law is undergoing a complete review. We need to listen more and actually enact on the Comptroller and Auditor General's very good reports about financial management. We need to address accountability. We need to sort out the MTFP and contingency funding, because it's become a nest egg for people that don't know how to align policies with funding and how it works in terms of outcomes. And when we're requesting technical expertise, we make sure that it's actually on the technical parts and not the whole project, ensuring that we're taking all the expertise of people and bringing it all together and producing an outcome.
KRISTINA Moore.
Thank you for the questions. Firstly, scrutiny, I think, can be done well, and I have experienced it from both sides of the angle. I also remember reporting on the committee style of government. I remember well the frustration that was felt by politicians and civil servants by the speed with which they could not get things achieved. And so I would be very reluctant to go backwards. I think if done properly and done well, the system that we have can be effective. Indeed, I've recently worked with Deputy VALLOIS as she scrutinised 2 pieces of really major legislation that we took to the Assembly, the Criminal Procedures Law and the Sexual Offences legislation. They were highly detailed, and the work was done exceptionally well. And I think through going through the scrutiny process with the panel, who did the process properly in public and with consultation, the laws became better. And the Chief Minister mentioned the fact that we moved through the first, second and third readings of legislation in one sitting. And he's absolutely right. If we had had the time to break that process down, along with some of the recommendations of the scrutiny panel, we would have made even better laws than we did. But hopefully we will have another opportunity to improve them in the future if we're re-elected. To move on to the issue of financial planning, I think there are many CEOs in the world who control much larger budgets than that of the states of Jersey. I think with the new system, the slimmed down departments, the removal of silo thinking, we can achieve a much more efficient working and better working practices amongst our departments. And I look forward to working within that system if you so allow it. Thank you.
Gordon Troy.
Yes, the Council of Ministers to committee. Well, the old committee system did build the island well in it and service it in the past. And my grandfather's great uncles, they were all involved in it, and it seemed to work. But this democratic decision to move to ministerial government, I'm really not sure about it, because they talk about the committee system being slower, but you know, here we are, we're messing about with the hospital years on, spending money like there's no tomorrow, and we don't get anywhere. And now we're talking about redebating the whole thing again after £28 million down the drain, which just is, you know, the principles I said before in my address, where, you know, the projects have got to be necessary, value for money, on time and on budget. And ministerial government just has not been able to do that. It's failed us so far, but maybe we can fix it. I don't know. We've got to get in and we've got to have a proper look at this, because it's not working right. And I think the gentleman over there was talking about some money for a charity that went missing. I think that's criminal, isn't it, if it's allocated and it's not paid? Very strange setup. I'd like to understand more about that. But I think moving back to the principles of looking after the island, we've got to get this spending and doing things right. It's really got to be fixed, because we're going to get nowhere with everything if we don't change the attitude of wastage and of time and wastage of money. Thank you.
And last but by no means least, Senator Sarah Ferguson.
Definitely. Right. We changed the taking away the silos and the collective responsibility alleged in a piece of legislation that we passed in the last couple of months. Now, the interesting thing about that piece of legislation is that an amendment was brought by Sir Philip Ballash, taking out the changes in the ministerial system. We kept the changes for the chief officer of the states because he needed the ability to manage the chief officers. But Sir Philip said that the setup for the ministers wasn't right. Now, I'm the only other member on this session here who has actually been on committees. And the big thing was that everyone was on at least 2 committees, and so everybody had a rough idea of what was happening in all the other committees. I think it was the poor communications that was the problem. The fact that we all knew what was going on, and probably the public knew better what was happening, because when has a politician ever been able to keep their mouths shut? Yes, we need to have to listen to scrutiny more, or the ministers need to. And, you know, they talk about extra time. When we ask for extra time on scrutiny, it's refused. Now, I was the first chairman of the Public Accounts Committee, Mr. Hewlin, and the question of the day was financial management, and it still is. We don't have proper information or control of wholly owned subsidiaries. We've still got £9.5 million face value of £100 notes in the vault. We've got all the blompy proofs for the wartime currency hidden down there. You know, it's rubbish.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It just remains for me to, on your behalf, to thank all of the candidates for coming up to Trinity this evening to give us the benefit of their experiences and what they're going to do for us. And I would like to mention, in particular, that we've got pre-polling available here at Trinity Youth Centre this coming Saturday between 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. If you can't get here on the 16th, to cast your vote then. So I hope they've given you food for thought and the way in which you're going to mark your crosses. And I'd just like to apologise for those who've had to stand. I'm sorry, but Trinity's turned out in full flood this evening, which is great to see, and I hope that we'll have such a good turnout again on the 16th. So with that, I thank you for coming and declare the meeting closed.